Guys, and welcome back once again to the Getting Started with Toon Boom Harmony tutorial set. Let's continue looking at the drawing tools. And so last time we looked at the brush tool. And so this time I figure we'll just carry on down and look at the pencil tool because they're very similar. They're just treated a little bit differently by the software. So the pencil tool, just like the brush tool, allows you to draw lines on your drawing elements. And just like the brush tool, if you access the tool properties window with the pencil tool active, you'll see you've got a series of brushes. There's a bunch of default ones put in there by Toon Boom, and a lot of them are great, but again, just like the pencil tool and just like the brush tool, you can make changes to your brush by adjusting these sliders. And you've got the same options. If you click on that window beside the preview, it'll open up the pencil properties window, and this should look familiar to you from our time with the brush tool. We can adjust all these elements. There's a texture tab here, which I'm sure is very interesting to you, and we'll definitely be visiting that at a later date. But just like before, you can hit that button there to update the changes you've made to your brush. I'm not going to, though, because I like my standard brush there. So long story short, a lot of the elements of the pencil tool are exactly the same as the elements of the brush tool. So once you know how to use the brush tool, you'll be fine with the pencil tool. So instead, I'd like to spend the rest of our time looking at some cool little features that the pencil tool has that also carry over to some of the other tools in Toon Boom Harmony. So these elements are in your tool properties window, and they're down here below your selection of brush shapes. So some of these are very specialized, and some of them you're going to use a whole lot. So I'll just go through the more common ones. So first of all, we got this one here. It's the draw behind option. New strokes will be drawn behind existing artwork. That's pretty self-explanatory, but I'll just give you an example. So right now, if I draw a blue line, and then I draw a red line, you'll see that the red line goes over top of the blue line. Makes sense because I've drawn it after the blue line. But, I'm sure you can see where this is going. With the draw behind option selected, if I draw my blue line, and then my red line will be drawn behind the blue line. And this is important when you're ordering different parts of your character in the drawing. You can also manually change the position of objects, but, you know, why not just draw it in the right position right off the bat? So that's draw behind. Next, we've got automatically create color art, and that can be handy, but we'll revisit that later because that's a little bit advanced. Next is auto flatten. Again, sounds pretty self-explanatory. But what that means is, and I'll use blue again here, if I draw a blue line, and then I draw another blue line, then I go up here and use my select tool, and we'll get more into that later. If I select one of my lines, you'll note that the line is still its own separate element. So I've drawn two blue lines here. However, if I've got auto flatten turned on, and I draw a blue line and a blue line, when I go to my select tool and try to move it, you'll notice it's sort of cut up the object anywhere that it intersects with another object, because it's flattened it, and now the objects are interacting with one another. You can either have objects that will always be sort of separate if you leave auto flatten turned off. So this makes for variable drawings. Or you can have artwork that interacts with one another by turning auto flatten on. So you can see these become individual pieces. And there's a use for both these options in any sort of piece of art you're drawing for Toon Boom Harmony. Okay, and then next to that, we have auto close gap. So automatically close strokes with an invisible stroke. Again, very useful. So as an example, again, I'll draw a little circle here. So if I draw this circle, and then I'm going to jump ahead a bit here and choose my paint bucket tool, and try to fill that with the color blue, you'll notice it's not filling. And that's because Toon Boom will only fill closed shapes, and this isn't a closed shape. You can see there's a gap here. Well, as you expect, if I turn on auto close gap, draw another circle, and then use my paint bucket tool to fill, you'll notice I'm filling it even though there's that open gap there. And that's because Toon Boom has detected that gap and these two ends that are very close to one another and has decided that you actually would rather have that closed. Now you can't see anything, it doesn't draw anything to close, but if I turn on strokes, which is something else we'll get to at a later date, so this shows us the invisible strokes that Toon Boom is using to build the vector shapes, and you can see that it's created an invisible sort of line between these two ends here to help close up that shape. So that's what's keeping the paint inside. So those are all the tools you need to know to get started with the pencil tool in earnest and get creating some art in Toon Boom. So go ahead and play with that. Make a few different pencil shapes of your own using the pencil editor. And when you're ready to try something else, come on back and we'll move on to another part of Toon Boom Harmony. Until then, happy animating.